What is 8-bit? Search the App Store for this term and you'll get games like Super Mega Worm, McPixel, Retry, Bitcoin Billionaire, Century City, and Star Trek Trexels. They all have one thing in common. They're drawn in lo-fi pixel art visuals meant to evoke video games of days gone by. But they also look quite different from one another and could be from many different eras and different consoles. So what does that specific piece of computer jargon, 8-bit, actually mean? And how many of these games deserve to use it when describing themselves? Well, for starters, let's figure out what the term itself means. A bit is one binary value, and as it's either 0 or 1, it has two possible states. 2-bit has 4 possible states, 4-bit has 16, and 8-bit has 256. That's 256 places to store information. Now, developers could be talking about 8-bit color depth. This is when each pixel in an image can be one of 256 different colors from a master palette. It's certainly a retro limitation compared to the millions of colors seen in today's games, but it can describe images that look like this, or like this, and anything in between. That's a broad range of images and doesn't do all that much to help describe which era of video games the app is trying to ape. It's more likely then that developers and journalists and publishers and players are talking about the 8-bit processors that powered consoles in the early 80s, like the NES, Master System, and ZX Spectrum. The term 8-bit doesn't refer to the graphics specifically, it's more about memory space and info registry and all that gumph, and is why Link's rupee count in Zelda goes up to 255, and Pac-Man goes weird if you go to screen 256. But the low power of these devices also led to huge limitations in the types of graphics that can be displayed. And it's not just about colours or size. Take the NES for example, where the complicated restrictions brought about by its picture processing unit led to the iconic graphics you see in games like Kirby and Mega Man. The PPU spits out one background layer and one layer for sprites, which are the moving images like Mario and his enemies. For the background, the screen is split into 960 8x8 pixel tiles. You can only have 256 unique tiles on screen at once though, so you'll have to repeat some. The NES can show a maximum of 64 colours, but only 13 at one time on the background layer. You get to pick 4 palettes, which are 3 colours each, and 1 backdrop colour. And you can't just use those colours wherever you like. Each block, which is a group of 4 tiles, can only use colours from one of those 4 palettes. The sprite layer is equally limited. The tiles are 8x8 pixels again, but you can stitch more than one together. Each tile has just 3 colours and transparency, and you can show a maximum of 12 colours on the entire sprite layer. You can't rotate or scale sprites, and you can only show 64 of them on screen at once. And don't forget that if you have 8 sprites on the same horizontal line, the rightmost one won't show up due to scanline limitations. All of these hardware restrictions lead to the sort of graphics that we might call 8-bit. It's not just about colour depth or the size of the pixels, it's about hardware limitations. The tight constraints led to really ingenious tricks and workarounds. Mega Man's blue helmet and beige face are 2 separate sprite tiles which make use of transparency, and the massive bosses in his second game are actually background tiles instead of sprites. Shatterhand faked SNES-style parallax scrolling on just one background layer by moving bits of the background and making sure they never intersect. And Batman Return of the Joker did it even better by using animated backgrounds to fake the movement. By the end of the NES, developers were making incredible looking games thanks to smart art design, clever workarounds, and the inclusion of mappers on certain cartridges, which let the game pull off a few extra visual tricks. I don't think it's necessary for designers to restrict themselves so resolutely to retro limitations to make their games look 8-bit. Shovel Knight, for example, might look like it could run on an NES, but it has colours not on the console's palette, oversized sprites, no scanline flickering, a widescreen aspect ratio, and impossible parallax scrolling. But it feels more worthy of the 8-bit moniker than the games that simply have a reduced colour palette and a chunky aesthetic, but would never actually run on a retro console in a million years. It's also worth remembering, of course, that there's more to 8-bit than the NES. Other consoles at the time had 8-bit processors, but their own set of limitations. The Commodore 64 has just 16 colours and weird wide pixels, the ZX Spectrum has those super bright colours and a massive border, the Game Boy works with tiles and only had 4 colours. so it's great to see games that mimic these consoles and computers too. Wrestling adheres to some limitations of the Commodore 64, 8-bit Doves is all done in 4 colours and has that sickly green hue of the Game Boy, and La Maluna wants to be an MSX game. So what's the takeaway from all this? Well, one is that you could never really know what someone means when they say 8-bit. It could be that they're using a 256 colour palette, it could be that they're trying to mimic the graphics of one of many 8-bit powered consoles, or it could just mean that it's all a bit pixely. It's like the words literally and nonplussed. Its use has become so ambiguous that it's not really useful anymore. And 2, 8-bit consoles were limited by more than just colours and resolution, so developers who want an authentic vintage feel should think about adhering to at least some of those retro restrictions. And 3, you should definitely bring up NES tile limitations and ZX Spectrum palettes every time someone says Flappy Bird is 8-bit, because it will make you sound really cool and everyone will want to be your friend.